So this, again, you're dissected. What you're looking at is the whole of the nervous system. And it's made up of a certain type of tissue. What you're actually looking at, because it's mostly the nerves, is a connective tissue covering surrounding the nerves right here. But inside, around here, right, it's made up of cells, right? It's unique in that it doesn't have any connective tissue inside it, besides the outside layer right here. It's all going to be nervous tissue, right? That special kind of tissue. And for nervous tissue, you're going to have the rock stars over here, right? The neurons. These are the ones doing the sensory neurons, picking up information, interneurons, integrating stuff, motor neurons, passing on information. These guys are doing all like the functional work right over here. These little dots that you see right here are actually making up probably 90% of your nervous tissue. These are called neuroglia. Right? These are kind of the glue. These are the support cells, right? If these guys are the rock stars, these guys are the cleanup crew, the roadies, the managers, the tour managers, right? They get none of the glory. These guys trash the hotel room. These guys clean it up. These guys get all the glory and everything. These guys are just their support right over there, right? So your nervous tissue is made up of these two basic cell types. The functional part is the neurons, and the support cells are the glial cells, the neuroglial cells, right? And for these, there's going to be 3 types of neurons and 6 types of glial cells. So we'll break these down right over here, right? So let's look at these glial cells, just get these out of the way, because they come up a little bit here and there, but this is all we want to say about them, right? Even though they make up the majority of your nervous tissue, they're just the support ones, and we'll talk about them as they come up, right? But they are making up most of your nervous tissue. And again, that's important because there's no connective tissue like all the rest of your body. That's why if you ever get to feel an actual live brain, and we'll talk about this later, it's all just big, really feels like soft tofu or something. But all these are all the types of glial cells, right? So for these neuroglial, in general, these are the neurons and these are all the glial cells in here. In general, for neuroglia, they come in all shapes and sizes, right? They have these cytoplasmic extensions over here, but they're not communicating like your neurons, as we'll see, are going to be communicating with those. They're just extending and they're doing different things in that case. Their function in general, among many things, they might be isolating the neurons from each other because there's all sorts of electrical and chemical activity that you want to keep separate. They're providing this supporting framework, right? They're going to make up a lot of the interstitium in between neurons. There's no connective tissue again within there, so they're making up all that. And they're basically controlling, and this environment really needs to be controlled, they're controlling the interstitial environment because neurons are very sensitive to slight changes around them, right? So again, most of the cells in your nervous tissue are actually glial cells, even if we only concentrate on the neurons over there. So let's look at these in just a little more detail, right? First one, which we'll never probably mention again, is the microglia, right? These are tiny little cells. Your nervous system does not allow the rest of the immune system to get inside it. If that happens, if you get a brain infection, your nervous system, your immune system does get in there, that causes all sorts of problems because your immune system isn't used to looking around at all the cells in here. And when it does, it's like, who are you? I never saw you before. And it starts attacking the cells. So you generally don't want your immune system in your brain. So your brain's got your own little private army of an immune system. And these would be microglia. Right? These are phagocytes. They move through there. They pick up dead stuff or any kind of thing that happened to get in through the blood vessels, which normally we're going to try not to. You also, these are neuroepithelial cells. They're connected together and they're going to be lined around the so-called ventricles of the brain that store cerebral spinal fluid, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But these are the glial cells that line the cavities and actually make the cerebral spinal fluid. And again, we'll go over that in detail when we talk about cerebral spinal fluid. And then there is the astrocytes over here, and their big thing over here, they control the interstitial environment. They pick up excess neurotransmitters around, any dead cells and stuff like that. So they're cleanup crew. The big thing for them is they're forming the so-called blood-brain barrier. That is, the brain tightly controls what gets into the brain tissue. And the astrocytes are a big part of helping that. So those are 3 of the 4 neuroglia of the central nervous system. The last one are the oligodendrocytes. And when I ask you, what does that? You'll be like, oligo, I can't remember the name of it, but that's what it is. Oligo, meaning many, dendro, meaning sort of dendritic processes, cyte, meaning cell. So these cells, what they do are form the so-called myelin sheath, right? This wrapping, this extension of their cell membrane wraps around the axon of a neuron, right? And we'll see what that does, right? But right now, just know that the oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system are what's myelinating the axons. Okay, so you can see this is one oligodendrocyte. It extends out, wraps around the segment of this axon over here, and it extends out over here and wraps around a segment of this axon. And then this oligodendrocytes extends out to this one and this one, right? So an oligodendrocyte can wrap up several segments of several different, or segment of several different neurons, right? So they'll be all along wherever we see these myelinated axons, you'll have oligodendrocytes. The other 2 types of glial cells, so that was the 4 types in the central nervous system. Then we have these 2 other types in the peripheral nervous system. And these would be your Schwann cells, which do the same thing as the oligodendrocytes do in a slightly different way. They myelinate axons, except that it's in the peripheral nervous system. So these will be in your nerves, whereas the other ones will be in your brain and spinal cord, so-called white matter. Right? Those are the Schwann cells. And they wrap it up a little differently than the oligodendrocytes, but they're basically providing the same function. And then the last type, we won't talk about this too much either. These are satellite cells. They wrap up the cell bodies of neurons that happen to be outside the central nervous system. That is specifically sensory neurons, as we'll see, are outside the central nervous system. They're cell bodies. They just wrap around it, and they do things like, astrocytic activity, like clean up stuff and help it maintain its health. It's basically supporting it in some way. So those are satellites. All right, so those are the glial cells, right? 4 of them in your central nervous system. These are their functions over here, right? And 2 in your peripheral nervous system, Schwann cells and your satellite cells. All right, so that's it for the glial cells, the 6 types, 4 in the central nervous system, 2 in the peripheral nervous system. We probably won't run into the microglia, again, those immune type cells, or the satellite cells. We will run into the oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system and the Schwann cells in the peripheral nervous system, because they make up the myelin sheaths that cover the axons of neurons, and they are a big part in how the impulse is conducted. And then the last 2 are going to be the ependymal cells and the astrocytes. The ependymal cells will line the ventricles, which secrete the cerebral spinal fluid, and then the astrocytes, which are going to be a big part in forming the blood-brain barrier, both of which will be topics of discussion later. All right, see you next time. That's it.